All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that I think is super relevant to all of us, no matter what we do or where we are in our careers. The difference between being right and, actually getting it right.
Yeah, I think that's a distinction that a lot of times we kind of take for granted. But when we start to really unpack it, I think we'll see it has some pretty profound implications for, how effective we can be in our lives and in reaching our goals.
Yeah, totally. And to help us unpack all this, we're going to be diving deep, no pun intended, into Leon Purton's work, specifically his piece called The Difference Between Being Right and Getting It Right.
Right. And what we really want to do today is give you some tangible takeaways. Like, how can you use these ideas from Purton to shift your focus from just being right, winning the argument to really achieving the best possible outcome, whatever that might be.
Exactly. So, for our listeners, think of this as like a crash course, a shortcut to grasping this crucial concept of success.
Yeah, I love that. So let's just jump right in. What would you say is the fundamental difference that Purton highlights here?
Well, he really makes this interesting comparison. He says the desire to be right often comes from a place of, pride, right? Like this need to kind of prove ourselves, to get that validation.
Right. It's almost like that ego boost you get when you realize you were right all along.
Exactly. And that kind of contrasts with the drive to actually get it right, to achieve the best result, which is more rooted in humility and a genuine desire to figure out the right path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like the motivation behind it is totally different.
Yeah, and Purton actually quotes Ezra Taft Benson in his piece, who said, "Pride is concerned with who is right. Humility is concerned with what is right." I mean, that just nails it, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. That's such a great quote. Really gets to the core of it.
Yeah, and Purton really emphasizes that the people he sees achieving truly remarkable things are the ones who are really invested in understanding and then actually achieving that right outcome, even if it means their initial ideas were totally off base.
Totally. And I think that's a great lesson for our listeners, too, especially those who are really focused on, quickly and effectively gaining knowledge. Understanding this distinction is like a cheat code. It helps you focus your energy on truly understanding a situation and gathering the right information.
Yeah, and that ultimately leads to way more effective actions than just digging in your heels and defending a position you might have been wrong about in the first place.
Right. It's about being effective, not just being right.
Okay, so now let's talk leadership. This seems like a really important area where this distinction plays out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Purton talks about this tendency for leaders to want to be seen as the knowers, the ones with all the answers. So what are some of the downsides of that mindset?
Well, when a leader always feels like they have to have the answer, it can actually, unintentionally of course, shut down the flow of information within the team.
Right. It's like that saying, when the leader's mouth is open, the team's brains are closed.
Yeah, exactly. If the boss always acts like they have all the answers, why would anyone feel comfortable speaking up? Raising concerns, offering different ideas, or even admitting they don't know something.
So essentially, critical insights get missed just because the leader's need to be right overshadows the team's collective wisdom and experience.
Exactly. And for our listeners out there who are working in teams, think about it this way. You might have valuable insights, but if the leader is focused on being right, they might not even hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that creates a culture of dependency instead of critical thinking.
Right. So what does it look like when leaders prioritize getting it right instead? How does that actually play out in their behavior?
Well, I think these leaders operate from a very different starting point. They acknowledge up front that they don't have all the answers and that that's okay. They don't need to.
Right. They embrace that.
Yeah, they embrace it. And their energy goes into creating a process where everyone can contribute, gathering different perspectives, exploring different angles, and then making a decision together.
Yeah, it's almost like they're saying, we're all in this together. Let's figure this out as a team.
Exactly. And it's a fundamental shift in focus, right?
Right.
The leader who needs to be right is all about maintaining that image of the expert, while the leader focused on getting it right is all about the destination, the actual outcome.
And they're willing to use the collective knowledge of the team to get there.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another interesting point that Purton makes. People generally don't like working with those who always need to be right. Why do you think that is?
Well, think about it. If someone always has to be right, they're saying that everyone else's ideas and experiences are less valuable than theirs.
Yeah, it's super demotivating.
It is. It sends the message that my ideas are the only ones that count. And Purton points out that this actually prevents important information from coming to light. Like, even if someone has a better idea or sees a potential problem, they might not speak up because they know they'll be shut down.
Yeah, because no one wants to be, like, constantly second-guessed or told they're wrong.
Right. And that's why Purton much prefers working with people who are comfortable saying, I don't know, what do you think?
It's such a simple phrase, but it creates a whole different dynamic.
Absolutely. It invites collaboration and opens up the space for new ideas.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the role of humility and openness in all of this. How does this desire to be right actually impact how we communicate and share information with each other?
Well, the thing is, this need to be right can really shut down conversations. It puts people on the defensive and makes them less likely to share different opinions or challenge existing assumptions.
Yeah, it creates this atmosphere where people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be shot down or contradicted.
Exactly. And the ironic thing is, the person who always needs to be right ends up limiting the very information they need to make good decisions.
Yeah, it's like shooting yourself in the foot.
Totally. And that's where the power of a few simple words comes in.
Ah, yes, the magic words.
Right. And Purton calls these 3 compelling words for leaders who are focused on getting it right. And those words are...
Drum roll, please.
I don't know.
Yep, simple as that.
It seems counterintuitive, especially for someone in a leadership role, but admitting that you don't know everything can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and, for our listeners who might hesitate to admit when they're unsure about something, remember this. Saying, I don't know, isn't a weakness. It's actually an invitation to problem solve together.
It's about creating a space for other people to share their knowledge and expertise.
So instead of the leader feeling pressured to have all the answers, they're essentially giving the team permission to step in and help.
Right, and that shows a lot of strength and security.
Exactly. And it really changes the leader's role, right? It's no longer about being the sole source of truth, but rather about facilitating a process where everyone can contribute.
It's about tapping into that collective wisdom.
Okay, but now I'm wondering, how do you actually balance providing direction as a leader with being open to the fact that you don't know everything?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, like walking a tightrope.
Exactly. You need to give people a clear sense of purpose and direction, but you also need to stay flexible and be open to new information that might come up.
So it's about being the guide, not the dictator, right?
Right, and I think the key is to remember that the ultimate goal is to move the team towards the objective, but to do that with a mindset of continuous learning and a genuine appreciation for what everyone on the team brings to the table.
Yeah, and that really speaks to the importance of diverse teams and perspectives, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Having different viewpoints and experiences can be incredibly valuable when you're trying to find the best solution.
All right, so now Purton brings in another perspective that I think is super relevant here. He mentions Dan Rockwell, who's known as the leadership freak. And Rockwell makes this really interesting point. All decisions, even the best ones, have imperfections.
Right, because we rarely have all the information we need and things are constantly changing.
Yeah, so how do we navigate that reality that there's no such thing as a perfect decision?
Well, Rockwell offers 5 principles for making imperfect decisions, and they really resonate with this whole idea of focusing on getting it right rather than being right.
Right, let's hear them.
Okay, so the first one is, don't pretend you made the perfect decision, stay curious. This means, even after making a choice, remain open to new information and be willing to learn. It's about letting go of that ego that wants to cling to being right.
Yeah, that's so important. You can always learn and improve.
Right. And the second principle is, make room for improvement after making tough decisions. Stay flexible. This emphasizes the importance of adapting and being open to changing course if new information emerges.
So the first 2 principles are all about continuous learning and adaptability, which are the opposite of someone who just wants to be proven right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what are the other 3 principles?
Okay, the third one is, don't project or protect the illusion that you have all the answers. Stay humble. This directly challenges the need to be right and encourages a more humble approach to leadership.
Yeah, humility is so crucial.
It is. And the fourth principle is, admit when you screw up, stay vulnerable. Taking ownership of mistakes rather than trying to hide them or blame others builds trust and creates a culture where people can learn from their errors.
And that vulnerability allows for growth, right?
Exactly. And finally, the fifth principle is, always seek the best interest of those you serve. Stay service-minded. This shifts the focus outward towards the well-being of the team or the people you're leading, rather than on personal validation.
I love how all of those principles really tie back to the core message here. They emphasize learning, improvement, and putting the needs of others first.
It's about being a leader who serves, not a leader who needs to be served.
Okay, so let's go back to that phrase, "I don't know," for a moment. We talked about its power, but Purton also describes it as an act of bravery, especially for leaders. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, in a lot of workplaces, there's this unspoken expectation that leaders should always have the answers, that they should be decisive and confident. So admitting that you don't know something can feel really risky.
Like you're showing weakness.
Right. But the benefits of admitting that you don't know far outweigh those perceived risks.
So it's about being brave enough to be vulnerable.
Exactly. Because getting it right often means relying on others and acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. And that takes courage.
And ultimately, that collaborative approach, though it might feel risky at first, leads to way better results than trying to maintain this illusion of perfect knowledge.
Right. Saying, I don't know, isn't the end of the conversation. It's actually the beginning of a more productive one.
It's like opening a door to better solutions.
Exactly. And that brings us to another point that Purton makes. The importance of embracing what he calls the tension of imperfection.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
Well, he quotes Teddy Roosevelt, who said, "The worst decision is often indecision."
I've heard that quote before. It's a good one.
Right. And it applies here because leaders who are focused on getting it right understand that waiting for perfect information can lead to inaction and missed opportunities.
It's that analysis paralysis thing.
Exactly. These leaders are willing to have conversations, to make decisions, even when they don't feel like they have all the pieces of the puzzle. They trust that they can figure things out along the way with the help of their team.
So they're comfortable with a certain level of ambiguity.
Right. And they value dialogue, diverse perspectives, and collaboration over individual correctness.
Okay, so if we were to sum up everything we've talked about today, what would be the one key takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's this. Shift your mindset from being right to getting it right.
Yep, that's the core of it.
It's about moving away from ego and the need for validation and focusing on what truly matters, achieving the best possible outcome.
And for our listeners, embracing this distinction can be incredibly empowering. It allows you to be more effective, more collaborative, and ultimately more successful in whatever you do.
It's about focusing on the result, not the credit.
Exactly. So as you go about your day-to-day, think about this. Have you been in a situation recently where you or someone you know was more concerned with being right than with finding the best solution? What might have happened if the focus had been different? How could you bring more humility and openness into your own interactions and decisions?
Those are great questions to ponder.
It's a subtle shift, but it can have a huge impact on how you approach your work and your life. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.